real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today, we are going to be talking about the failure to train both physical and mental aspects of a person. For that, I've got two returning guests on the show. I've got Matt Domyancic and Mark Bouchard here. Matt was previously on Season 2, Episode 61, and Mark was on Season 2, Episode 30. So go check those out for their bios and backgrounds. You get a little context to what they've been up to. But I want to say welcome to both you guys here today.
Thanks for having us back, and thanks for having both of us on together, because if the people don't know it out there, Mark has written what I think is the best book on police mental health and wellness, called Setting My Sights on Stigma. And through reading that book, me and Mark have become really good friends, even though we're in two different countries and we see a lot of things similarly, and then we have different perspectives on other things. But it's beautiful to have open-minded conversations about how can we improve the humanity of the people wearing the badge, putting up with all the BS they are, as well as trauma and immersion of suffering of other people on a regular basis that we're just not preparing them for, in addition to things like, are cops really getting enough fitness, fighting, gunfighting, progressive scenario training to make better decisions under stress. So
yeah,
happy to be here. Stoked.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Matt. And we actually met through your podcast, Nathan. After you had Matt on, I listened to it and I loved what he had to say. And I mean, Matt's a wealth of knowledge. He's got 3 master's degrees, and so we became good buddies through that. So thanks again. Thanks for having me back on too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you know what? I've used this show to connect a ton of people, even across countries. And that's honestly one of the biggest benefits of this, is just getting to share a lot of the ideas back and forth, because we're doing, I think in the policing realm anyways, we're quite a bit ahead of a lot of other countries. So not just talking US, but even you look at Britain or Australia, I think Canada is doing a lot of things really well. And a lot of people are looking to kind of learn from some of those things. So we're at the forefront in some things. We're definitely behind in a lot of others. So I don't want to pump the tires too much. But I do want to start with just asking Matt a little bit about where he's been, because you've been out like gallivanting around the whole country and doing all these retreats and stuff. And you've been helping out a ton of people yourself. So you just got back from a trip. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So once a year, and I would do it more if I could get more funding, I take mostly cops, but a few firefighters from Los Angeles and from very busy, dangerous, stations that see a lot of stuff. I take them to Missouri, and we do clay pigeon shooting, fishing, ATVs, horseback riding, roping with cowboys, kayaking. We do some pistol shooting, but it's not law enforcement training. There's a range out there that has video games like zombies, and so it's plain. It's like, there's things that you get in touch with your inner child, like just going for a trail ride on an ATV, roping and riding with cowboys when you're from LA and you've never seen any of that stuff. And then there's a lot of peace and solitude in nature. And then there's the community of your peers, your brothers that have been through a lot of things as well. And a lot of magical things happen on these types of retreats. And these are proactive retreats rather than, at least in the States, there's very few retreats for first responders or veterans. But to go on them, you have to go through an application process and have severe PTSD and or battling through addictions and or have attempted suicide or have suicidal ideation. That makes it a completely different setting.
Yeah.
As well, those retreats have strict schedules, breakfast 7 to 8. Then 9 a.m., we're going to start a PowerPoint on the signs and symptoms of PTSD, addiction, and suicide. And then 11 a.m., we're going to sit in a circle and do some Mitchell model debrief. Why don't you share why you are here? And it's good to get in touch with your emotions. Or there's other retreats that try to get into spirituality or religiosity. And they try so hard. And often it's with people they don't know yet or may not trust, or there may be other first responders or veterans they don't know. And then you're kind of like trying to force them to do things. And anytime you take a cop, even if you take them on a trip and then you have a set schedule, they're still in game mode.
Yeah.
They're not going to relax. And we're good at wanting to be productive and staying in game mode because it's uncomfortable when you're not on your phone and you're sitting in nature to some degree. And you can't stay busy with work or with our self-medicating type dealios, whether that's drinking and women and our Harleys and all these other things we do to stay distracted, including social media. So these are high functioning cops and firefighters that have been through a lot of stuff personally and professionally, but the wheels haven't come off yet.
Okay.
And then it's like, hey, sleep in, eat whenever you want to eat. Also, what's different in Missouri than California or Seattle or Portland or Chicago or DC is that the community loves cops. So you have all these volunteers that are saying, we love you, we appreciate you. There was a state legislator, Jim Schulte, state senator, Jill Carter in Missouri, that come to hang out with Los Angeles cops and tell them how much they care about them. Yeah, so these cops are like, wow, community support. And there's research going all the way back to Vietnam veterans that the betrayal by the people you serve is like the moral injury. So at some point, they did this with Vietnam veterans. If you go on a retreat and you have people from the community 20, 30, 40 years later say, I support you. I thank you for the sacrifices you made. This goes back to tribal communities. And tribal communities throughout history, when you come back from battle, the community puts you in the middle of a circle and says, share your stories with us so we can emotionally and spiritually share the burdens with you that you did for us.
Yeah.
But right now in society, the cops are on Instagram, the politicians, media, special interest groups are dehumanizing them and demonizing them.
Yeah.
So imagine you go on a retreat and you see American flags and thin blue line flags, which will get your car vandalized in Los Angeles. Those are all over the place in Missouri, all over the retreat center. And they're saying, what can we do for you? We thank and honor your service.
Wow.
And then you have nature, silence, solitude. You have all these outdoor activities that you don't have to do if you don't want. And it's beautiful and organically without any psychoeducation or religiosity type stuff trying to force on them. And granted, all these people have experiences with me of riding along, lifting and shooting and other things where I've developed a relationship with most of them long before we go on this retreat. And so they've had some, they know what I'm all about. But when they go on the retreat, we don't tell them they have to do anything. And all of them, all 12 of them, either with me or somebody else on the retreat or in small groups, ends up diving deep into conversations about the traumas at work, the relationships in their marriage, the struggles in their marriages or parenting their kids or things from childhood that they haven't, thought about and how it relates to the things that are bothering them now that they see on the streets or happening with their coworkers. So all these retreats that I've been on over the years, first responder, veteran, men's retreats, religious retreats, contemplative spirituality retreats, Buddhist, Christian, Native American, they want to happen what happens on these Missouri retreats. And a little bit may happen, but organically, it always happens in Missouri by not trying to force it or tell them about it. And nor do I cut them off and try to teach them about it while they're sharing with me. It's just beautiful to be like, in my head, I can be like, this is what's happening. And this is what's healthy about post-traumatic growth without having to teach it. So that's kind of a nutshell thing. And they really bond with each other. It's beautiful.
So, yeah, you know what? And, well, I've never been to Missouri, so it sounds like I should go there. And, we're going to get into more of the spiritual side of things and talking about the mental aspects too. But maybe we'll kind of start now on just talking about that failure to train. And where the idea of this show kind of came out of was I posted a McDojo video. I reposted a McDojo video on LinkedIn, and I think you jumped on it, Matt. And it was just I was making kind of a joke about like this is what the public or the critics of police think that like how a takedown might go, and some of the back and forth that we had, and then other people were jumping in on it, which kind of led to this idea of like, hey, maybe we should have a bigger discussion. Was some of the McDojo stuff is not far off from the training that we might receive, and so I just want to kind of get your ideas around this, and you too, Mark, just talking about some of the failure to train the physical skills. So like, what are we seeing out there that isn't done right? Where are we kind of missing the mark on a lot of the physical skills? And I'll kind of preface it with, when I look at like defensive tactics, having gone through 2 police services, RCMP, EPS, and the defensive tactics they train, and even the shooting to an extent, but it's in like for the most part, it's in a very sterile environment. It's very like, hey, you're going to grab this way on the wrist, and then you're going to turn it this way. And it's like, that is not how a fight goes. So we're not setting people up for success. And especially if they haven't been in a fight in their life, we are not showing them what exactly violence looks like overwhelming, unconditional violence. When somebody wants to do you harm or doesn't want to do what you're telling them, this is what it looks like. So maybe I'll start with you, Mark. What are you kind of seeing out there? You've been through tactics training, tactical training. Like, how do we make it better, more realistic for people?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on what you said right at the end. How do we make it more realistic? I think that's a key central starting point. Because sometimes our reality of what that we face and our training aren't very different, or sorry, can be very different. And I think that is a bit of a training scar of like, okay, we need to make training safe. So then we don't make it very realistic to what we actually face. So recently I transitioned into our National Tactical Medicine program. And that's part of what I'm trying to bring to the program is more closely align training, like the training that we do with our realities. And yeah, that's just my experience. And I share this example, but the first suicide by cop attempt that I experienced, I had a carbine out. I'd only had 2 days of carbine training. That was our carbine course.
Mhm.
And it was all marksmanship. Everything was like shooting at 50 meters on a scope, and just trying to have the tightest grouping you could have on a piece of paper that never moves. And then the reality was I had to decide whether or not to shoot someone from 15 feet away, on whether they had a report of a pellet gun that they said they had, that they pointed it at me. And now I'm using the iron sights that I'd almost never used on this gun. So I just think the reality of the situation and what I had been prepared for were so different. And as a central concept, if we start from there, yeah, we still need to make training safe, but there's almost a balance between that. And I'd say, like in my time on Earth, we've done a lot of high speed training that's pretty dangerous.
Mhm.
We'll do all kinds of shooting where it's not just guys on a line standing still shooting. There's people moving, there's vehicles, there's guys in front of the shooting line. And there's times we took it too far. I will say there was one time I was a new guy on the Earth team and they were shooting right over me. Like they had me as a downed officer and they had me to come to a rescue. And the guy running the training literally put me right in the line of fire. They were
Oh,
shooting
wow.
steel over top of me. It was a really, really bad plan. And I even tried to ask him, like, can I just move over like 10 feet?
Yeah.
It's like, no, he draws a big X on the ground. I want you right here. So I'm not saying we need to be stupid. Like, I know, honestly, that was a really stupid plan. But I think we need to bring those closer together. And too often, like even I watch a lot of like YouTube videos of shootings and police interactions. And you often see where the officers are like, they're down at the low ready. The person's coming at them with a knife, but they're so used to on the range. Oh, they never point their gun at the target till they're actually shooting. So they're basically pointing down at the ground or the person's feet instead of actually pointing their gun at the target. And I think truly that's probably a training scar from just how we condition people at the range to keep a range safe, as opposed to realizing they're going to go to really dangerous things, and our training needs to closely enough reflect that as much as we can, while still keeping it safe enough.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll definitely get into some of the meme talk because there's been a lot lately. But yeah, you know what? I would say, like, even some of the firearms training I've done recently, where we have our carbines out and it's more the dynamic stuff. So they'll like set up a course and you're kind of progressing through it, but it's like moving and shooting, running to a spot, stationary, standing, kneeling, and then you're moving to another thing. But in there, they've had courses where it's like, okay, but we're at some point you might turn around and run backwards or like to a point behind you. And they're just focused on like, hey, making sure your gun's down. If you laser anybody, you're getting kicked out of here. So there's like, you can make it more dynamic and more realistic without it being dangerous or just outright stupid. So, Matt, do you have any point on that there?
I got all kinds of notes. First of
Yeah.
all, for the Americans and people in other countries, when Mark says ERT, ERT, Emergency Response Team, he's talking about SWAT, like totally legit SWAT or a tactical unit. So I just want people to be clear on that. And for anybody out there that is a civilian, perhaps, you have to realize that legit SWAT teams are people that have done way more training on their own and then regularly get tons of high-speed training on the full-time teams like Mark's been on. And there's other SWAT teams in America that are part-time or collateral that have no training or very little training. So when they do something on the news and get criticized, it's not because they're racist or brutal. First of all, you can't make violence look pretty. They are untrained. It's a failure to train thing. And the example of Mark lying on the ground, this could play into a lot of other training in law enforcement where people are uneducated, even the instructors, and don't understand, like, first you need to develop motor skills to where they're automatic without stress. So do the science or the research on the science of how long does it take to just do a motor skill with no additional stress? How many reps does it take a kid standing in front of a goalie to kick the soccer ball into the net with no goalie, no defender on them, no crowd, and not having run sprints up and down the field? But in law enforcement, we get a chance to do scenario training. That kid maybe had 5 kicks 5 years ago in the net without a goalie or a defender or running sprints before. And then they get all excited like it's scenario training day. I'm going to smash that kid with suicide sprints. We're going to have 300 people screaming at him, a goalie and 3 defenders. Go.
Yeah.
And then they fail. Then that creates training scars and it's not realistic. So you need to be able to do motor skills, whether that's martial arts skills, handcuffing, or shooting, unconsciously, automatically, without thinking, before you start adding in progressive levels of stress, that you can continue to perform the motor skills successfully and start making lower level decisions with success, and then incrementally adding pressure and stress. So like in football, you start out studying game film and the playbook, the X's and O's. So you intellectually learn about football. Then we go out and walk through your position, maybe just with helmets. And then we do shoulder pads and butt up, like 50% speed. And as soon as you hit, and you're doing it in isolation, it's like, I'm a linebacker. There's a center, a guard, a quarterback, and a running back. We're starting with a small piece of the situation until I can master that half speed butt up. Then we add the rest of the offense, the rest of the defense. Then can I master that at half speed? Then we put full pads on, and then we go back to an isolated drill until I can do that isolated drill, full contact, and get used to that. Then we add in a couple. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We are progressively layering in stress. We eventually scrimmage before we play a game. But what happens in law enforcement is you get basic marksmanship skills, which is not gunfighting. And people can barely hit a paper target, closing an eye, doing breathing, and slowly taking shots without anybody yelling, not after a chase in a patrol car, in the dark, with somebody that has a knife or a gun and a massive adrenaline dump. So people don't understand. They can't even do basic marksmanship most of the time, let alone gunfighting skills. It's like we play flag football. We look at game film and we do a little bit of, half speed flag football. Then 5 years from now, it's the Super Bowl, and I hand you a full uniform, and you've never had a full uniform on and been hit full speed by a 250-pound jacked D1 football player.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good way to put it, because when you do the compare and contrast, like a simple static shooting in recruit training, where a lot of people, that's like the most training they're going to get in their career. And then you have 20, 25 years of just, I go out once a year, do my qual, and then that's it. Unless you seek out extra training outside of like being in an actual specialized unit where you might be mandated to, right? You got to make sure you maintain a certain amount of hours in that skill. But that also, in what you're talking about there, it kind of makes me think like you're progressing through, hey, we're getting you up to speed, but where do we set the basic standard at? And how do we, how is that determined? Like, this is going to be the standard. And then why do we settle for that? So why do we not have continuous training, or why do we not say, maybe this is the basic standard, like whether the state or the organization or somebody says, you just got to meet your qual once a year. But why are we not going above that and saying, that's nice, that's the basic, but as the supervisor or the person running the organization or whatever it might be, why are people not saying, well, I want you to do it twice a year, and I want you to do a dim light qual too, which is a contentious point here in our service that I brought up. I'm like, we do a dim light and a daylight like shooting qual for our rifles, which is our secondary weapon system. I was like, our pistols, we don't even do a dim light qual. So it's like, and being in Edmonton for about quarter of the year, nighttime is longer than daytime. Like, there's more chance I'm going to be in a shooting at nighttime. And just in general, bad guys go out at night, right? They're under the guise of darkness. So how do we not have a nighttime qual? Like, these are all things that it's like, why aren't we just doing the little things to better ourselves? So kind of, if one of you want to jump on that.
Sure. I'll jump in. I'm going to touch on two things. You touched on the basic standards, so I'll get to that in one sec. But you also mentioned, between the two of you, the basic marksmanship skills of shooting. And I actually want to speak to that because we probably have a lot of law enforcement people listening, people who stress about their firearms quals, fail their firearms quals, and often they don't know why. When we change our instruction, our failure rate goes down. Essentially, I think sometimes we're not teaching it very well. And I've seen this right up to even hurt guys, SWAT guys struggling to pass specifically on their pistol qual. And when you start looking at the pistol fundamentals, I think what's often happening is people see their sights and they think they have a perfect sight picture, and then they hammer their trigger and the gun moves around on them and they miss the round and they get frustrated. Instead of thinking about their sights as though it's a video, understanding that it's probably never really fully perfectly aligned, but it's like kind of good enough. And you just keep squeezing the trigger consistently. And then in a way, you're kind of surprised when it goes off. When you do that, you actually will hit way more. So like, I've filmed a lot of people. I've helped a lot of people who get ready to go take our firearms instructors course or go on a SWAT tryout, and tried to help them get ready. And when you show them that difference, you actually film them and you show them, man, the difference in their shooting is very dramatic. So just watching for that, instead of thinking like, my sight picture is perfect, I better panic and hammer the trigger. That's the number one reason why I've seen people failing on their pistol quals. Now, it's different when you get into more advanced shooting of timings and things like that. Recoil management, you start talking about different fundamentals. But truly, it's like sight alignment and trigger control is why most cops are failing their qual, from my experience. Now, in regards to the second topic you brought up, which is like basic standards, I think we need to have standards. I think it's a crucial thing. We talked about it with ERT teams. Like, okay, I'll give you an example. There was one day we were doing an operation and we had to actually weigh ourselves because we were using an elevator. And that can cause a problem if your elevator's overweight. Big problem if the team gets stuck in an elevator. So me in my full gear, my basic police gear, my heavy gear, which is like the plates, the magazines, all the special gear you get for being on an ERT team, and my medic bag is 100 pounds.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we need to have standards that show that you can actually carry this kind of gear and function. There's going to be days when you're doing a high risk dog track and you're off in the bushes for extended hours. You need to have the physical capabilities to actually do that. So we want to make sure we have standards that make sense. And I don't think we can change the standard just to get more people in. It can't be, well, too many people are failing the qual, so we should just make it super easy so everyone passes. Well, I don't think it's not a great plan. So I think we need to have like objective ideas of what it is we need. Like even for our organization, we recently changed our fitness test. They tried to update it and make it more relevant. And again, I don't know
Yeah.
the science behind the change, but I've done even different basically SWAT tests or emergency response team fitness tests, and they're not all the same. So I think we should look at what we're doing and why we're doing it and how well it lines up. And then I really agree with not just trying to meet the basic standard. I will tell you, if you show up to ERT tryouts and you're ready to meet the basic standard, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
The basic standard for us is like an 11-minute mile and a half Cooper's time. If you aren't running 10 minutes, you're probably not getting through. Now that there's a bit of variability if you're super jacked and you're huge and like you're fit in other ways, but essentially the bare minimum, there's a bare minimum for a reason, but you should be pushing yourself to be better than a bare minimum.
And this is one thing, and I'll get to you here, Matt, right away. This is one thing that I had a conversation with Jay Smith about, and he was brilliant on this stuff. Like just talking about standards and how we develop them, and both like there's the ethical component, right? Like I want people to survive, and I want to make sure that it reflects the job, and then there's the legal component where we have to meet whatever the province or the state or whoever sets certain standards. So but and my thought is even not just in firearms but in tactics, like whether it's driving or fighting or whatever it might be, um, we want to set standards that are, I guess, everybody is looking at meeting, but above that, or should we have standards that are always higher than the expectation? Like, where's the comfort zone in there? So, yeah, go ahead there, Matt.
Well, on that point, there's so much to talk about. But on that point, legally, you need validation studies for your agency, state, jurisdiction of who's already on the job and what are their
Mm,
standards. Because you have people you've already hired and are working the streets, and you do a randomized control test, whatever, of their fitness. If we were doing fighting and shooting, which we don't, we're not doing. Does the public know that most agencies at this point may not even have fitness standards to get hired or pass the academy? And definitely when you're done with the academy, cops do not have to meet a fitness standard in the majority of agencies.
correct.
And then the firearm standards are not the gunfighting standards. And there's barely any quote martial arts training at all. There's no standard. And even when you have martial arts training, 2 hours a year, perhaps, it's a PowerPoint on don't do that. There's new policy and legislation. Don't do
Yes.
this. Don't do that. You're going to get in trouble for this. You're going to get charged with a crime for that. So the standards are based on who's already working and already have been through what has been overtime for a variety of reasons, political reasons. We want to hire more people for diversity. We lower the bar to get them in, and then we lower the bar to push them through the academy. We spent the money on the background check. We spent the money to get them in the academy. We want to push them through. Now we have less applicants because of the anti-police culture. Less good people want to be cops. We have staffing issues. We got to get bodies in. So we lower the standards more. But the expectations of the politicians, the medias, the lawyers is you better operate like a tier 1 Navy SEAL or Green Beret as if you're a fitness stud, you're a gunfighting stud, you're a UFC cage fighter. But then go look at the training records of these people that you're criticizing, and you had 80 hours of martial arts, baton, handcuffing, and taser combined 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So think about your kid playing little league or high school sports. Every 90% of what an athlete does, or 95%, is training, and
Hmm.
5% is competing. 2 to 3 hours a night, little Johnny's catching and throwing and batting. 2 hours a night. In 1 week, little Johnny does more baseball than the police officer does shooting, fighting, and fitness in an entire year with the agency.
Yeah.
Do people understand that? And then some lawyer and psychologist and politicians are going to break down something they did 6 months, a year, 2 years, and criticize them that they should have acted like a professional competitive shooter, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, a psychologist, a social worker, and a paramedic, right? They're going to have all those standards with people looking in hindsight with all this time when they barely have any training or education, frankly, in a lot of these things, most cops.
Yeah.
And we don't do this. Look at the medical profession. Nurses and doctors require a ton of clinical experience and academic experience. They kill and disable. Go look at the numbers. It's 150 to 250,000 people a year in the States are accidentally killed or maimed by doctors or nurses. And we don't try to send them to jail. And they have more training and education than cops. We don't let people in the surgical room film and scream at them and then criticize. And if somebody complains about a doctor or nurse, do we take them from their peers and lock them in a room, or go tell them to sit at home for a year or two while they and their family are getting death threats because of a complaint that turns out to be completely false? And maybe the agency doesn't even come out and say that complaint is bogus, you know,
Yeah.
because of political reasons. So there's so many things, and the standards are also low because we have leadership that was not, quote, real cops. We're hiring managers for political reasons. Where's the ghetto patrol cop that worked the graveyard shift and had all these felony arrests and then went to gangs, narcs, SWAT, or some like super serious investigative unit and then climbed the ranks? Who understands training? And then if you speak up, can a chief of police admit to city council, hey, my guys really don't know how to fight, and we put them in scenarios and they all crap the bed? We need more money for more firearms. We need on-duty martial arts, and we want them to be able to work out on duty. Whoa, that's too much money. That's way too much money, logistics, time, or somebody's going to get hurt, right? We're worried about somebody getting hurt.
I think one of the aspects in there that is really good is, police are so involved in so many things. Like we're doing all these different units and handling all these other functions that maybe we shouldn't be involved in, because then that would give us more time to have the proper training and focus on the things we need to focus on, right? So if I enforce criminal legislation, I'm looking for people committing criminal acts. What functions do I need to be able to do that? I need to be able to drive a police vehicle operations, firearms, use of force stuff, criminal law. I need to know these things. Well, okay, then I can't be doing whatever other unit that we're doing right now, whether we're focused on being a mental health unit or whatever the boutique unit there could be. We have to kind of focus on, here's your functions, your core functions. You need to be experts at that. And I think that might be, I have someone coming up on a future podcast here talking about police reform. And actually that might be a topic I'll try and bring up with them, is like, well, if we're going to look at ourselves as true professionals, like a doctor or whatever else there might be, then it kind of speaks to the level of training that you're talking about, Matt. So we need more classroom training. Maybe it's like a degree you get to be a police officer or something. And then with that comes, certain certifications and continued training. Because I think that's a thing that's also missing, is the continued training aspect. Maybe on kind of what we've been talking about, and I'll jump to you, Mark, talking about showing the public what we do. So if we can say like, hey, woe is me, and everybody's crapping on me, and they don't understand me. How do I show them, or how do the police services show them what is really going on out there, and how violence works? Like, what can we do to make that better?
That's an important topic. I think it's a real challenge for us. And I'm not sure there's an easy answer. I often call it educating up the chain of command. Now, it's a different dynamic because it's not really your chain of command. But I've seen it where, for example, some of the things we do sound very risky. Rope teams, explosives, medical procedures, and they could be fatal. but they're also super important to have those capabilities, and not having them can. So I think there can be an adversarial relationship with the media. And I think it's because we got to look at people's mental models. They often come from this point of view as though violence is bad. Cops do violence, therefore cops are bad. And I think it's on us to actually educate them about the reality of situations, that, hey, this person just murdered several people and the police respond and they start shooting at them. Like, the cops are heroes for what they're doing. They're not bad for using violence. They're keeping society safe.
Mhm.
So what does that look like? I don't fully know. I have seen scenarios or things even online where they take an activist or a reporter or something, and then they put them through some police scenarios. And often the perspective of the person changes dramatically. I think it's recognizing what you're trying to do to actually change someone's belief system, change someone's thought process from violence is bad and those cops are bad. And you're just teaching them enough about what we do to help educate them so they can understand. Because I think as the police, we really need public support. And I think we've
Mhm.
been in an era where it's been really challenging. Part of why I have a chapter on police culture in my book, and I added a portion on anti-police culture, because there really are people out there that hate the police, that want to destroy the police. They're going to do everything they can to chip away at our symbols, at our gear, whether that's cops need to be unarmed or we can't have tanks, the armored vehicles that aren't really tanks but often get called tanks, or can't have rifles. But then, like, those people don't know about the North Hollywood shootout and how two guys with AKs went around for 40 minutes shooting up a town, and the couldn't even stop anyone. Like, no one wants that. But then they hear about a police officer having to shoot someone, and then they don't want that either. So at the end of the day, I think that's where, police leadership, police training sections need to be proactive. And
Yes.
part of what you're doing with your podcast, it's getting out there and changing the narrative, because a lot of the public doesn't understand what we do. And the only way they're going to understand it is when we educate them. I have seen some agencies where they'll put out like videos after the fact. And I think so often, especially here in Canada, we're very risk averse. Like, we don't want to say anything. It's
Yes.
before
Too
the court,
risk
can't
averse.
comment. And I think we got to do the opposite. I'd say, in my opinion, if we had something where within 7 days, we will give you an initial report. We'll release the body cam footage. We'll give you our initial assessment. It might change when we get all the facts. But all of a sudden, while it's still a hot topic, the public can understand that generally we're doing an amazing job. Whereas when we tell them 2 years, 4 years later, after a court case, after, all these things, it's on page 37 of the news and no one even hears about it.
So I'll add like there's a lot I could add in there, but I think the US, and maybe Matt could speak a bit to this as well, is the US has kind of switched to, like you're saying, where they're almost doing it like within 24 hours. They're like throwing out body cam and other things. There's like the bosses are making statements. Very quickly, I'll just say, so there's a few things that I think can be done. One is ride-alongs. So like politicians, like if you're in charge of a city, you should 100% be going out with all the services in your city, whether that's the guys running the power or the water or the police. Like, you should know what those people do at a frontline level, not just going and talking to the CEO or whoever's running the place, because they're giving you a very different perspective than what's happening. So you have to be out there in the trenches and see what's going on. It's like, take one day or one night a year and just go see, and it'll improve morale and spirits like you wouldn't believe among people. The other is, I was saying this just on the podcast I was recording a bit earlier. I think we need to get into schools and teaching people again, like, this is how like our society works. Our, everything from government to police to like all the institutions you're going to come across in life. So we can do a whole lot on the back end as police, right? We're kind of like at the end of the line. We're trying to play catch up for all these years of people uh, being indoctrinated or led down a certain path of belief. It's like, where's the stuff at the front end of this? We need to change minds, or not even so much change minds, get into the minds when it's early and they're still forming those opinions and those views of people. So we say, this is how the whole system works. This is why police come in and when they come in and what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish. I think that's a few of the aspects that I would look to change. I got a lot more on that, but I'll let you speak, Matt. So just can you tell us kind of what the situation in the US is? Because, yeah, they've switched to like releasing video right away and some statements right away.
That all comes down to different agencies, departments, and geographical
Mm.
areas. Because, I mean, you'll see the Georgia State Police will pit people at 110 miles per hour and yank them out of cars and, pick them up and body slam them, and the public's cheering them on, and they're actually prosecuting them, right? Or the sheriffs in Florida get on and say, hey, somebody missed when they shot at a burglar.
Yeah, yes.
Hey, we're going to offer free firearms lessons so you can save the taxpayers money by killing the burglar next time.
I've seen that, Chief.
And then
Yeah.
in California or Washington or these other places, like, things happen and then you don't hear things for months or years, while the cop that was in this unfortunate incident, that in and of itself, most especially if they're completely justified, still is hard psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually on them and their families and their friends. And they're sent home, or they're sent gag ordered to sit somewhere in the station without being around their community, their patrol unit, their narc unit, their family, can't talk about it. And the agency doesn't say anything for months or years until they think the political pressure has blown by. And then maybe they quietly put them in another unit or another position in the department they really don't want, even though they really weren't in trouble and were not proven guilty of anything. And that's a huge issue down here, is, as Mark calls it, sanctuary trauma in his book. And this is even before the BLM and anti-police stuff. If there's anybody in your chain of command or your leadership or your city council or county board of execs or your politicians that are not supporting you, I know the bad guy doesn't like me. That's okay. That's what I signed up for. But when the people that are supposed to have my back don't stand up for me, that's betrayal at a level that's beyond comprehension until you're in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening all the time in America. And then you go to, nobody's bringing up training when they fry that cop. When I say fry, even if he's not prosecuted, they just put him under investigation or they try to charge him with something. Nobody opens up the training records. And let's talk to some kinesiologists and professors at colleges on motor skill development or complex decision making. How many hours would they need of firearms, martial arts, and driving to be good at those motor skills? How many hours would they need in progressive, stressful situations in practice to be effective at making decisions with all of those motor skills? Let's look at those hours that we can get from academics, and then let's look at the training records in the academy and in service and see how long it's been since that incident. And let's look at sleep logs. Are we paying attention to sleep? The city or county is mismanaging these departments. Morale's down, so people are quitting or leaving for other agencies or leaving states. We're short-staffed. Now we're forcing overtime, more trauma, more immersion in the suffering of others, more risk of a use of force where I'm the one that might go to jail and the criminal's going to get let go. And nobody's paying attention to sleep. Nobody's paying attention to blood work on their metabolic factors, their blood sugar, their hormones that are getting screwed up, and paying attention to what their heart rate variability is, which is an indicator of both how good your sleep is and what your daytime stress like.
Yeah.
Why aren't we paying attention to that?
Well, even you think of truck drivers, right? They got to have, like, they keep logs of, like, I can only drive X amount of hours a day and I have to be sleeping or whatever else. But then you give like a cop, it's like, man, you could pull like super long shifts, overtime, back to back, and you're given a gun and you're driving at high speeds in a car. Like, so yeah, we need to manage these things a lot better. Maybe I'll kind of flip to some of the mental side of things, and we could talk about that here. So what are we missing the mark on this? I think there's going to be a lot of stuff, but I want to say I do believe it's getting better. I see a lot of the things that the RCMP up here are doing. My service, the EPS. There is some change in the US, like with certain services. It's just very much more fragmented down there. But I think people are starting to really pay attention to the mental health side of things. and making sure members are proactively taking better care of themselves. It's not just only reactive. So, what are you guys kind of seeing as like what can we do better in the proactive space? I'll say we'll start with that.
Okay, I'll jump on that first. So I'll actually add a little bit of what the evolution has been and what I think it's going to be, where we need to get to. So it used to just be we didn't do anything. And then eventually it got to if you were lucky, like for me, the psychologist I did an intro interview with told me about emotional survival for law enforcement. And it helped me tremendously. And then we got to the point where maybe like your field trainer would tell you about it or hand you a copy. So I used to do that for my recruits. I'd give them a copy. And eventually, like my first agency started issuing it to every police officer. Now that's kind of where the more progressive departments are currently at. I've talked to different police chiefs that issue that book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement by Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. Now, you mentioned EPS. You guys helped found reintegration training, which is fantastic. It's awesome. It's been spreading all over the place. It's really progressive. If you don't know about it, go look it up. Um, so they issue 2 books. They issue or at least in the RCMP, they issue Kevin Gilmartin's Emotional Survival, but they also issue On Combat by Dave Grossman.
Hmm.
Now, what we need to get to is to actually include the concepts from these kind of books and from the science and the research that's out there into training. Instead of waiting until after you've been through a shooting and you've been off work for a while and you've already hit the point of thoughts of suicide and like your life really went down a bad, painful road for a really long time. What if we taught you all this ahead of time? So what if we took a bunch of Gilmartin's concepts, the magic chair, the I used to, like the cynicism, the scout leader, the story of 2 dads at the end, and we teach you all these things at the start of your career? How much healthier would all the police officers be? How much better would they be in a place to actually serve people?
Yeah.
How much less would we spend at the end? Like, what do we spend when we send someone to rehab? Like, it's massive tens of thousands of dollars that we're spending to try and repair someone because we didn't invest $20 in a book at the start of their career.
And that's just one person, right? Like you
Yeah.
could be spending tens of thousands on one person. That even comes up with the physical stuff. So like when we were trying to get suspenders and different belts and all these other gadgets, and everyone, you hear from like chain of command a lot of the time, or just maybe some old disgruntled constables, but it's like, they just want to look cool, or they just want the newest, flashiest thing. It's like, no, because I actually know that you have bad knees and bad hips and a bad back. Maybe I just want to not be like that when I get to your point. Like I want to actually survive this career without all the physical ailments, or as little as possible. So same on the mental side, right? I think just with the physical stuff, it can be seen, people feel it, so people can relate to it a little easier. The mental side, you don't have that seeing is believing aspect, so it's a little more difficult. But obviously, lots of people are affected by it. I would almost wager that everybody's affected by it. 100% of people are affected by it. They either just don't know it in a way that they can kind of quantify it, or the other, which I would say is probably more common from people I've talked to and what I've seen and experienced, is they just don't want to admit it. So,
Yeah. Well, I would say, I bet you most of their families know. Like, I bet you if
yeah,
you ask their family,
yeah,
they see the changes. And I've seen people, they get hired, like Gil Martin says it on page 3 about how we go from these idealistic rookies to like cynical veterans. It doesn't take very long to happen. And I've watched people, they get hired, they're the happiest, nicest, kindest person. And I've sat in on police recruiting interviews. Oh, I want to help people. And after 5 years of the job, like we can be pretty grumpy, pretty miserable, pretty negative, and at times like can be hard to be around for those that love
yes,
us.
yeah,
So that's like, but we don't need to. We can practice gratitude. We can practice meditation and journaling and all the yoga and all kinds of stuff. It doesn't need to be that way. And we haven't hit the next phase of the evolution yet. What it's going to take is for some agency to be proactive enough to start doing it. They build in an extra week in training. They take all these concepts, like 1 hour out of the week of every week of training, you get taught something like this. And man, you will have so much healthier people that are then able to help people. And you won't have this ODS problem of people being off work 10 years in, and you won't have the early retirement cost. And now you got to go recruit new people and train new people. Like, we can't afford what we're paying now for not
yeah.
having done this 10 or 20 years ago. And I just want to be a part of trying to get that change to happen. Unfortunately, we can only do our one little piece, but that really was why I wrote my book. Was like it was the kind of things that I needed that I was just trying to share with the world, and I just put it in a book so that people would believe it's credible.
Yeah.
You just put it on a website, people spend 2 minutes and click on to the next. Like we have short attention spans. But yeah, my hope is that we can do it in the profession, and I'm confident we will. I just want to accelerate that change.
Well, we got to get your book into Depot and a few of the schools. So, Matt, you're doing all the retreats and helping people out. So, what opinions you got here?
All right, I got some notes here I'm going to run down. First of all, yes, Mark's book, Setting My Sights on Stigma, should be mandatory reading either in the police academy or when people are on their field training. And if you're a police psychologist, a police chaplain, you're on a peer support team, his book should be mandatory, along with Gil Martin, Grossman. Also, The Psychology and Physiology of a Violent Encounter. Tony Blauer is the best for that. I think every academy should be teaching the SPEAR system, spontaneous protection, enabling accelerated response. You have to have your motor skills down, but then understand what happens during an adrenaline dump in a holy shit moment. How do I get myself back into those motor skills after I've been surprised at first? Also, there's a guy, Paul Whitesell. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's never done a book. Vietnam veteran, psychologist, was a police chief or the director of the Indiana State Police, combat psychology. He totally gets it. Struggle Well is a book, but also Boulder Crest Retreats are doing post-traumatic growth. They should be teaching post-traumatic growth along with Lauer, Grossman, Gil Martin, Mark Bouchard, Paul Whitesell in every academy. This is stuff that we need to be discussing. And also we need to be talking about the parasympathetic nervous system and the somatic effects of stress and trauma and being around a steady diet of toxic, negative, dysfunctional, and violent people. How does that affect my body? And there are objective ways other than our families and friends recognizing down the road, well, they're changing a bit. They're bitter, sarcastic, drinking more, chewing more energy drinks, more shutdown. Before the academy, after FTO, we should do blood labs. Invest in blood labs with hormones, all your blood sugar markers, your inflammation markers, your metabolic markers. Buy everybody an Oura ring. Start paying attention to people's stress and sleep patterns. HeartMath and other biometrics can measure heart rate variability. I want to see what your heart rate variability is when I hire you, then what it's like during FTO, then what it's like a year or two after the job, as well as your testosterone, your thyroid, your cortisol. And then there's EEG, which is neurofeedback, which you could hire psychologists or some people in the sports psychology profession to measure your brain waves. Let's look at you before you're a cop, but people may not want to do this. Then down the road, we're going to be like, whoa, your blood labs are off, your HRV is off, your brain waves are off.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we are actually liable. And this stress and trauma and immersion in the suffering of others and a steady diet of the public crapping on us and the politicians and the media and maybe poor leadership is breaking down my brain, my body, my spirit. And there's objective data that we can use to look at it. And because so much of it is unconscious, maybe we're going to save lives because we're going to realize that person needs a break or that person needs some help. And we have to teach people, whether it's meditation, yoga, journaling, gardening, artwork, playing a musical instrument, woodworking. We need to learn how to calm ourselves down.
Yeah.
And how to improve our HRV and our sleep, which we can look at the data. But there's no training on the parasympathetic nervous system, heart rate variability, very little training even on sleep or understanding how alcohol and caffeine and junk food affect our sleep. And that, yes, we have cops that have been up more than 16 hours, so they're operating as if they're drunk. And they're making decisions and their motor skills are suffering. But then we're going to throw them under the bus when they get in a use of force and they don't make it look pretty when they get in a fight or a shooting.
Can I jump in for 1 sec, guys? And then I'd actually like to throw it back to you, Matt. I want to give people context on what that really means. So we had a couple emergency response team calls, And our area is pretty large. So I had to drive like 6 hours. So basically, I got called out in the middle of the night and pretty much haven't slept. And then I go drive all night, go to the call. Then I got to drive back the next day. So now it's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm just about to get to bed. And I get another call, go another 600 kilometers, whatever, 400 or 500 miles away. And I end up being up until about 10:30, 10:45 that morning when that lady comes out of a house with a gun in her mouth. She's committing suicide by cop. And I literally made a decision to shoot her because I understand action reaction and that she can shoot me before I can react. And people think it's like laser tag and that, well, you'll just get one off and you'll get lucky. And no, like I'm going to die or someone else is going to die. So I took my gun off safe. She ends up going back in the house. I didn't shoot her, thankfully. Probably would have got charged because there's a very, in my opinion, the sentiment for police oversight is fairly anti-police in that jurisdiction. But I had slept about half an hour in a car at that call. And I think between the previous 48 hours, I'd slept about an hour and a half. Now, the RCMP does have policy saying you need 8 hours clear sleep, but sometimes there is no one else. Like the reality is we are often on call, getting called out, and we do our best to get you sleep where we can. But truly, we don't really have the resources and the systems. And we have to understand what that's doing to people. Like I'm going to end up potentially in jail for the rest of my life, living with someone has died because I've had to shoot them. And I'm making that decision when I'm not even allowed to drive a truck. Like we spoke about that earlier. And this goes back to costs. Like, oh, we can't afford more training. We can't afford more resources. We can't afford what we're paying in lawsuits because of the outcome.
Exactly.
That's the really expensive things when we pay people millions of dollars because something really bad happened because we didn't invest in something sooner. So I just really wanted to highlight for anyone who's not in law enforcement and doesn't get the reality of what this is like. I just transferred from operational to a more administrative role. It probably took me 2 months to feel like I wore off some of that sleep debt, that I just was constant exhaustion. You wake up every day and you need caffeine because you feel terrible all the time. And now I have a consistent schedule that I couldn't have before because I was 2 days, 2 nights, and I'm pretty much on call 24/7 outside of that. But the second thing I wanted to say, Matt, you talked a bit about parasympathetic nervous system activation. Now, there probably are a lot of cops listening who haven't been taught a lot about that. You're an expert, like you know a ton about this. And I think it'd be a great chance for you to give them a couple tips on like, hey, for somebody who like I lived in fight or flight mode. I never came out of it. I went and got blood tests. That's what I was told by my naturopath. And I've learned how to shut some things off, and it's been really good for me. But I guess what would be maybe your top tip or top few tips that you would give to some of the cops out there listening on how they could learn to better activate their parasympathetic nervous system?
Gosh, first of all, the parasympathetic nervous system means rest, relax, digest. It's pumping the brakes. And in our regular society today, like we're all sympathetically driven, even if you're not a cop, a firefighter, or somebody in the military, because we're on our phones, we're on our computers. It's go, go, go. And we're in a divisive society where you turn on the TV or everybody's taught to argue and fight and find what's different. So we are all hyped up and everybody's going to have different things that could calm them down. But like some of the simple things I'd say is invest one day, take a whole day off and go get a deep tissue massage and or acupuncture. If you have cold plunge and sauna near you at one of these wellness centers, commit to, I'm going to do a cold plunge. I'm going to do a sauna. I'm going to do a float tank. I'm going to go eat a healthy meal. And then I'm going to go get a deep tissue massage. And then wherever there's nature by you, a pond, a lake, the beach, the mountains, I'm going to turn my damn phone off. And if I have a dog, that's the only thing I can take with me is my dog. Because petting an animal will lower your cortisol and increase your oxytocin as well. But I'm going to take the dog and go sit by a lake, a pond, a river, a stream, or go for a hike in the mountains. And I wish you would do that one day a week, half a day a week. Go give your woman a massage. I told about a SWAT conference. When I give my woman a massage, my oil ring thinks I'm taking a nap because contact with people we love will improve your heart rate variability and activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So quit being a hard ass. If you love your woman, give her a massage. It'll be good for both of you and it'll also lower your cortisol and increase your oxytocin. You know, Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. He says that tango dancing would be more beneficial than therapy for some people. So, dancing's for whatever. If you got a woman, like sign up for some dancing lessons and then go get a couples massage and then go sit in the sauna. So I would say let's do experiential things to actually feel like what it's like to relax. And that's what happens in Missouri at Peterson Outdoor Ministries is you get on a plane, you leave work, you leave the responsibilities of your family, and we're telling you, we're taking care of you for 5 days. You are responsible for nothing other than relaxing. And then you play with the clay pigeon is like the inner child fun playing and the different games, horseback riding, sitting on a boat, going out on a kayak by yourself, and giving those types of experiences that every cop deserves and every department should be paying for things like that, not the reactive intervention retreats. Oh, now you got full-blown PTSD, addiction, you're on your third divorce, you wrapped your car around a pole. I'm going to offer you therapy with a psychologist you don't know, a chaplain that you've never seen before, or some peer support member that doesn't even work your station, day shift, and never cleared leather with their gun. No, that model doesn't work. The reactive only. And there's just, so parasympathetic nervous system, actually experiencing what it's like to rest, to relax. We could get into breath work and yoga and all those things, but I think the simplest thing would be go get a deep tissue massage. Next week, try acupuncture, do the cold plunge, even though that hypes you up at first, afterwards, it'll calm down your nervous system. Give your woman a massage, go spend some time in nature. Right. And learn how to relax, which is really hard because working overtime and being productive is just as much as a self-medication as drinking, screwing people you shouldn't screw, driving fast, and more chew and more caffeine. That being productive and overtime is a medication, just like the guys that are posting their jiu-jitsu and CrossFit 24/7. You are now doing things that are healthy to an extreme. That's also covering up emotional reactivity. Now you need to rest, relax, and digest.
You know what I love about what Matt just said? Like, we should get taught this in training. I wish someone had taught me what Matt just said. That's why I asked it for everyone's benefit. And a bunch of what he just said is free.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of stuff that will help us stay healthy for the long term. Nathan, I know you had Dr. Nick Carlton on your show at one point. I've been lucky to have a few group or calls with him. He basically says our rates of like PTSD and mental health injury or, diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, don't need to be as high as they are. But if we can start to change how we cope with things and the behaviors that we do, we can change our outcomes. And this kind of stuff that Matt's saying, prioritizing actually getting out in nature, prioritizing connecting with someone, go tango dancing. Like, I learned to love gardening. I never thought I would say that. I learned to love yoga. Like all these things, they end up being really good for me. I learned to love sunsets. I never would have thought I'd say that. But I say this because I know there's a lot of cops out there listening. And I want you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you could take from this? Like out of all those things Matt just said, what's one that maybe you're not doing yet that you could try? Because in a way, yeah, your agency could hire some expert and pay them a ton of money and they could come teach you this. Or you could just take one of these pieces of advice from Matt right now and go and apply it in your life. And let's actually have this, like some benefit come out of this conversation.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's a great place to kind of end on this. We've got some solutions there and a lot of it is free. It's just, you have to put in the effort. You just have to do something even simple as reading a book. I didn't do any reading and now doing the podcast stuff, I do a ton of reading now. So, but I like it because it's just like exercising the mind, but I'm way more calm than I am doing anything else I was doing during the day. So, just one thing, try one thing out, see how that goes. And if it doesn't work for you, it's not hard to change. It's not hard to go on to something else. So,
can I say one thing? Just to summarize all that stuff. In all of the world's major religious traditions, there's a component called the contemplative or the mystical tradition, which doesn't focus on the rules to enlightenment or heaven. It's more about the spiritual experience of peace and love, and also finding meaning in darkness and adversity. And throughout history, the people that do these contemplative practices to set the foundation to have a quote spiritual experience of having like deeper love and peace and finding meaning even in the darkness and the suffering is four things: silence, solitude, immersion in nature, and fasting. And in the old days, that was fasting from food, which now science will tell you there are a ton of benefits. But what you need, and I shouldn't say need, what I suggest, because I don't like trying to give answers, which so many influencers and gurus want to fix and tell everybody what to do. But I highly suggest taking periods of time during your day or one day a week where you fast from technology. So spend some time in silence, solitude, nature, and fasting from technology.
All right. Man, you know what? Again, that's something that you would think it should be easy for people to do. It doesn't cost anything. Go outside is usually at a good start. I think those are some real good words of wisdom, and appreciate you both for sharing those things. Last thing, where can people follow you, find your work? We'll start with you, Matt.
My website is tacticalchaplain.com, tacticalchaplain.com. And some people want me to get another one because the chaplain thing we didn't talk about, but that gets a stereotype. And so I work more holistically than what the title may suggest. On Instagram, I post most on Thin Blue Line Spirituality. I also have the Tactical Chaplain. Don't post as much on that. But people can reach out to me through the website, through Instagram. And if anybody needed to chat on the phone, they could send me a message and I'll give them my number.
Awesome stuff. Mark?
Yeah. So I have a book, Setting My Sights on Stigma, Thoughts from an Injured Mind. You can find it on Amazon, wherever you are. My website, Mark Bouchard, is .ca, and that's Mark with a K. I'm on some different socials. I'd say LinkedIn's probably the one I actually really use. I just started a YouTube channel. I've only got one video so far, but I'll be putting more out. It's called Police Mentors. And then I've created a course. Just about to run the first test of it. It's on lethal force psychology. It's going to be run out of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. And so you can Google them. And yeah, we hope to have it out pretty soon.
Awesome stuff. Well, we'll end it there for today. I'll remind everybody, like, comment, share, follow these guys, look at the stuff they're putting out, because that's the only way you're going to be able to help yourself is by getting some good ideas, sharing. I think you guys are making a huge difference in the world, and you have a massive impact on with the things that you're doing. So I really appreciate your work and taking the time to come in and talk today. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, guys. It was a real honor.
Thank you.